Coming up today, Korea's political parties are putting the final touches to their candidate lists for the April 13th general election. President Park Geun-hye urges the parties to maintain their focus on boosting the economy. In a worrying new report, the Washington-based Institute of International Finance says Korea's household debt last year grew faster than practically any other emerging economy. First, US President Barack Obama lands in Havana to begin his historic trip to Cuba. He's the first sitting US president to visit the island nation in nearly 90 years. Stay tuned for these stories and more. Hello, it's noon on Monday, the 21st of March. You're tuned in to our midday newscast here on Arirang TV. Thank you for joining us. I'm Mark Broom. Our starting point today is the scramble to prepare candidates for Korea's general election, which is now just over 3 weeks away. The ruling Saenuri Party held a closed-door meeting this morning as the process of whittling down the final few candidates continues. The party has remained mum on whether Yoo Seung-min, the party's former floor leader, but not part of the pro-President Park faction, will be put forward or not. The party's nomination committee chairman, who is a key Park ally, revealed late Sunday that the committee is waiting for Yoo to step away from the nomination process voluntarily. Now, the main opposition Minju Party of Korea has revealed its latest set of candidates who will run in the April 13th election. The party has its own issues, though. Some in the party are upset that interim leader Kim Jong-in has been nominated for yet another proportional representative seat. It will mark the fifth in his political career. The minor opposition People's Party also released a list of candidates on this Monday, names that will go on the ballot for the election. The nomination process should wrap up by Thursday, as that's the start of a two-day candidate registration period. And President Park Geun-hye has waded in to the election debate, calling on the nation's political parties to not lose focus of their responsibilities by paying too much attention to campaigning. Speaking earlier today, President Park warned that by taking their eye off recovery efforts, Korea could once again slide into turmoil similar to that experienced during the 1997 Asian financial crisis that rocked Korea and most of Asia. Saying the economic clock should not be stopped for the election, she called on her senior secretaries and politicians to do what they can to improve the people's livelihoods. The president also stressed that Seoul's diplomacy on the international stage will decide the future of the Korean peninsula leading up to the unification of the two Koreas, pointing out that over 5,000 South Koreans have died in North Korean provocations since the 1950 to 1953 Korean War ended in an armistice agreement. She said national unity will stop Pyongyang from its aggressions. And marking the 6th anniversary of North Korea's sinking of the warship Cheonan this Saturday, the South Korean government will hold a ceremony on the West Sea on Friday, the first of its kind. South Korea and the United States will hold their first round of high-level talks on the sanctions on North Korea in Seoul on this Monday. According to Seoul's foreign ministry, the U.S. State Department's coordinator for sanctions policy, Daniel Freed, will meet with South Korean officials at the ministry in the afternoon, indicating the meetings will focus on the effective implementation of the sanctions on North Korea, these imposed by the UN Security Council and individually by the US and South Korea as well. Washington's special representative for North Korea policy, Sung Kim, will later join the meeting and is expected to hold separate talks with South Korea's top nuclear envoy, Kim Hong-gyun, on Tuesday. Now, this all comes 2 weeks after their first meeting in the U.S. capital. Seoul's chief envoy just returned from Beijing, where he held talks on the same issue with his Chinese counterpart. South Korea's household debt is rising at one of the fastest rates among emerging economies, this according to one international report. Now, the pace is alarming, but some experts maintain the soundness of each loan rather than the total amount of debt is of more concern. Hwang Jie with the details.
Korea's household debt rose at the second fastest pace among 19 emerging economies last year. According to a new quarterly report by the Institute of International Finance, the household debt to GDP ratio rose over 3 percentage points in 2015 from a year ago, following closely behind China. The household debt burden on the population was also the third highest, following Singapore and Hong Kong, with the average amount of Korea's household debt per person standing at $29,000. Korea's record low key rate of 1.5%, coupled with a set of aggressive stimulus measures last year that included packages to prop up the country's real estate market, have been stoking concerns of a worsening household debt problem. The Bank of Korea says the amount of debt currently stands at around $1 trillion, taking a toll on the country's overall spending. With that, the government last month introduced new guidelines that toughen lending requirements, and experts say such measures will prevent the debt issue from dampening the country's overall growth potential.
Despite the rise in total amount, if the government manages to maintain the soundness of each loan, the issue will not get out of hand.
Still, many experts cite the snowballing household debt issue as a potential risk to the Korean economy. The IIF also says the pace of growth is alarming, which needs close monitoring. Hwang Jie, Arirang News.
Now, the number of full-time homemakers in Korea is falling as more women join the workforce. The latest data bucks a decade-long trend which had seen the number of stay-at-home mums swell. Kim Min-ji has this report.
With more women entering the workforce, the number of full-time homemakers are on the decline. According to Statistics Korea, the number of full-time homemakers came to around 7 million last year, down 0.8% from a year ago. That's down for the second straight year, following a 2.1% drop in 2014, the first since relevant data began to be compiled in 2000. During the first 2 months of this year, the corresponding figure also fell over 1% on year. Experts attribute the drop in full-time housewives to a highly educated young population in their 20s and 30s joining the workforce. On top of that, it's been harder for households to make ends meet with just the male working, and as many couples are getting married later, the figure will likely increase down the road. In the 25 to 54 age group, the percentage of economically active married women rose from under 50 in 1990 to almost 60% last year. Meanwhile, the total female working population aged between 15 and 64 stood at 55.7% in 2015. The Korean government plans to raise that figure to nearly 62% by 2017. It will lay out measures to boost female employment next month, which will likely include policies to improve conditions for women to use child leave vacations, as well as support in finding jobs after giving birth. Kim Min-ji, Arirang News.
Now, Korea could suffer a labour shortage of 9 million people by the year 2060 because of the country's chronically low birth rate. The Korea Institute for Health and Social Affairs released a report on this Monday, which shows Korea will see a deficit in the workforce needed to maintain its production levels from 2024. From 2030, Korea's labour supply will drop yearly until it reaches a shortage of 9 million in 2060, over 1/5 of Korea's expected population then. The researchers pointed out that the nation's economy faces a higher risk of shrinking than suffering from labour shortages, though. They added that Korea should increase its employment rate and roll out new measures to boost women and seniors' participation in the workforce. Hyundai Motor Group has expressed no interest in taking over an embattled shipping company and says it remains focused on its car-making business. Market sources have confirmed that Hyundai Glovis, which is a logistics unit of the auto giant, has been contacted about a takeover of the ailing Hyundai Merchant Marine. A high-ranking official at the automaker said the unit had zero interest in Hyundai Merchant, which has nothing to do with vehicles. Hyundai Group has been working to save the shipping company, which has been in the red for years now. But the group recently announced a set of self-rescue measures, including selling off assets. Last Friday, shareholders of the ailing shipping company approved a capital reduction aimed at preventing it from being delisted from the local stock market. Arriving on Air Force One, US President Barack Obama touched down in Havana on Sunday local time, a symbolic considering that it brings to an end more than half a century of hostility. Obama will hold talks with his Cuban counterpart Raul Castro as part of a trip that would have been unimaginable even a couple of years ago. EG1 has more.
The President of the United States touched down in Cuba on Sunday local time. This is the second time in history that a sitting U.S. president visited the island nation and the first time since 1928. Upon his arrival, Obama greeted the Cuban people through social media, showing his eagerness to meet with them. Obama's first stop was Havana, where he met with staff at the U.S. Embassy and a walking tour of Old Havana. On Monday, he's scheduled to attend a state banquet hosted by Cuban President Raul Castro at the presidential palace following a summit meeting. During the talks, the two leaders are expected to discuss steps to deal complex issues, including Cuba's political and economic reforms. President Obama is also expected to give a public speech regarding political prisoners and human rights, sensitive topics for the Castro administration. He will also meet with dissidents and attend an exhibition baseball game between the Tampa Bay Rays and Cuban national team. Obama's visit is highly significant as it opens a new chapter for both countries after decades of animosity between the former Cold War adversaries. However, Obama's itinerary does not include a meeting with the 89-year-old communist revolutionary Fidel Castro. 이지원, Arirang News.
Now, Salah Abdeslam, the man captured in Brussels late last week for his alleged role in the Paris terror attacks, has told prosecutors he had been ready to commit more atrocities in Europe. Kim Mo-gyun reports.
It has emerged that Paris attack suspect Salah Abdeslam told investigators that he had been preparing follow-up attacks in Brussels. Belgium's foreign minister said the suspect's first words upon his capture suggested his plans.
The first comments coming from Salah Abdeslam was yesterday that he wanted to go to the Stade de France in Paris, and it was to be a suicide bombing, but he stopped. We don't know why, but he stopped. And the next informations are that he was ready to restart something from Brussels. And it's maybe the reality, because I said we have found a lot of weapons, heavy weapons, in the first investigations, and we have seen a new network of people around him in Brussels.
The French government has asked Belgium to extradite the 26-year-old back to France, but the suspect's lawyer is opposed to the request.
I think there is a case in Belgium that has to be taken care of. He must explain himself here first. His return to France can wait until the Belgian case is complete.
Belgian authorities said Abdeslam and a second man arrested with him on Friday had been charged with participation in terrorist murder. Abdeslam will appear before a judge in Brussels on Wednesday. Officials added that despite the arrest, Belgium will remain at its second highest level of alert, level 3 for the time being. The November attacks on a sports stadium, bars, and a concert hall in Paris killed 130 people and was the deadliest militant attack in Europe since 2004. Kim Mo-gyun, Arirang News.
Now, today is World Poetry Day, a day set by UNESCO as a way to recognize poets working around the world. A secondary goal is to support linguistic diversity, and here in Korea, the poet everyone is talking about is Yoon Dong-ju, who is known for his moving compositions during Korea's years under Japanese colonial rule. Oh Se-young reports.
Plum blossoms are in full bloom in Korea, heralding the arrival of spring. As they bud in winter, withstanding the freezing conditions, the flowers have come to represent virtuous scholars throughout history who endured great hardship during their lives. One such celebrated figure is Yoon Dong-ju, a poet known for his lyrical compositions and resistance against Japan's brutal occupation. To commemorate Yoon's legacy, a public concert was held over the weekend in a village flush with plum blossoms. His best-loved works were recited by singer Yoon Young-ju, who is also the poet's second cousin. The singer also paid tribute to his cousin with a song inspired by the poem Prologue.
His integrity in life was admirable, even to his family members, and his love for our country and people shines in his poems, expressed through internal resistance, not conflict.
Yoon grew up during the height of the colonial era, when Koreans were oppressed by Japan's military authorities. From the age of 17, Yoon expressed his torment over this suppression and his hope for a liberated Korea, under the theme of The Sky, the Wind and the Stars, the title of his anthology. But his poems couldn't be published as Japanese authorities banned Koreans from using their own language. But Yoon refused to be silenced. He entrusted this manuscript to his younger friend Jeon Byung-woo, who preserved the text underneath these floorboards in a house in Gwangyang City, Jeollanam-do province. Yoon would never see his poems published nor his country freed. He died at the age of 28 in a Japanese prison where he was sentenced for his role in the Korean independence movement. His anthology was published in 1948, 3 years after his death and Korea's liberation. Since then, his works have become a timeless source of inspiration for modern Koreans, especially in recent weeks among young people.
There are so many beautiful poems that I love. You can see how he kept our literature alive in a suppressed society.
It's impressive how he wasn't swayed by his surroundings, but confidently voiced his emotions.
It's moving and sad. It makes me proud as a Korean and grateful to live in this generation.
A movie on his life titled Dongju hit local cinemas last month, sweeping box offices with ticket sales of more than 1 million. Also, sales of his anthology spiked in February, making the bestseller list in most large bookstores. 71 years after his death, Yoon Dongju's delicate yet earnest words continue to speak to Koreans today. Oh Soo-young, Arirang News, Gwangyang.
Well, those are the stories we have been following on this Monday afternoon here in Seoul. For more of the latest, don't forget to check out our website, arirang.com/news. We also have a smartphone application. You can find it by just searching for Arirang TV in the usual places. Have a wonderful day and a great start to the week. Goodbye.